Well, thanks to all of you. Thanks, Sabine and Antia, for those words. I hope those words become policy and not only stay in words, because that's what we would like to hear. Commitment, true commitment for freedom and democracy. This morning, like every morning for the past months, I woke up with the news that a good friend of mine, a member of our movement and a founding member of the World Liberty Congress, was abducted last night. Today he's in prison. And later this morning, I got another message that a very close friend, family member, was also abducted and sent to prison, and his entire family was prohibited to leave the country. And this is the truth. In our country, that today we have more than 2,000 political prisoners. Only 6 months ago, we had 200 political prisoners. And this is something that's been growing. It's been happening. I've been fighting for democracy and freedom. That it's something that means to us much more than words, because it's how we see life, how we live life without freedom. And we fight for the hope of living with freedom. Been doing this for many years. And as it was said, I spent 7 years in imprisonment, most of the time in solitary confinement. Then I was able to escape prison. And since then, I've been in exile, and I had the blessing of meeting other people like myself, who are very different in many different ways: skin color, religion, the history of our countries. But when it comes to talking about what we do every day, which is to fight for freedom, democracy, and human rights, it's the same story. Doesn't matter if it's in Hong Kong, or if it's in Azerbaijan, like Shala's father who is here, or in Afghanistan, Shukra, or in Iran, or in fact, most of the world today. Because what we have seen over the past 2 decades, as we heard earlier today, the world is becoming more autocratic year by year. Today, 72% of the world population is living under autocracy. And this is not the way the world was 10, 15 years ago, that it was only 40%. So we have seen a rapid growth of autocracy all over the world. And it's a growth of autocratic regimes that is non-ideological. It has nothing to do with right or left, conservatives or liberals. It has to do with core ideas that anyone who defines themselves, any movement who participates in a democratic society, should keep as their core values. And those core values are the respect for human rights, rule of law, and free and fair elections. That's the core of what most of the world today don't have. In fact, 5.7 billion people in the world are living without the rights that most of the people in this room have. And that's what we fight for. So being in exile, I had the opportunity of, as I said, meeting all of these people, and we decided to come together and to build an alliance of democracy defenders, freedom fighters, people who are willing to stand up and fight for freedom every day and democracy. And when I say freedom and democracy, for us, we are talking about things that we really understand, not because we have them, but because it's been taken away from us. I actually knew what freedom was when I was in a 2x2 solitary confinement cell. That's when I understood what freedom was. Because I understood that freedom is not one thing. It's the sum of many things that had been taken away from me and millions of people from my country and billions of people in the world. The freedom to do what I'm doing right now, to speak out freely, that's been taken away from us. For speaking out, you go to prison in my country, but you also go to prison in Iran and in many other countries. The freedom to do what we are doing today, to assemble and to speak freely, that has also been taken away from us. The freedom to move freely from one part of our country to another part, it's been taken away from us. The freedom to own property has been taken away from us. My house was taken away from me, like the houses of many activists, democracy defenders. It's been taken away from them, like the property and businesses from hundreds of people in my country and thousands of people around the world has been taken away from them. So freedom is a sum of all of those things. And that's what we fight for. And that's what we are committed to. Thank you. And we understand that given the situation of the world today, that the world has become less free, that the only way that we can reverse this trend is if we work together. We understood, all of us understood very clearly, that the fight for freedom in each one of our countries has a global dimension. Because in Venezuela, we're also fighting against the mullahs from Iran. The president of Iran was in Venezuela only months ago. We also fight against Putin. Nicolás Maduro was visiting Russia a couple of weeks ago. It's also against China. The vice president of Maduro was in China only a couple of days ago. And this translates into support to these regimes, financial support, military support, diplomatic support, kleptocratic support, support in the ways to keep people under control. They collaborate by sharing technology, sharing the ways that they imprison people, the way they torture, the way they communicate, the way they manipulate the public opinion, the way they use social media, the way they close the civic space. They do it in very similar ways, and they learn from each other. They work together. And we need to do the same from the democratic world. So I appreciate very much that we are having this conversation, not just about human rights, because it's not just about human rights. Because let's be clear, we cannot have human rights if we don't have freedom. And we cannot have freedom if we don't have democracy. It's as simple as that. So if you believe in human rights, if you believe in freedom, you need to believe that democracy is the only way. But let me take this also to other issues. Because there's been other priorities at the global level for the free world. Climate change has been the biggest one. And I believe it's a very important priority, of course. But if we look at the source, the core origin of most of the problems that we are having in terms of climate change, it's also autocracy. And if we take a look at another issue that has been destabilizing Europe and the United States and every democracy in the world today, migration. The root cause of migration, it's also autocracy. Where do the people are coming from who are coming to Germany and Europe? Where do they come from? Where do the people going to the United States crossing the border, where are they coming from? They are coming from countries that are under autocratic regimes. And when they are asked how and when they will go back to their countries, the answer is simple: when we have freedom and democracy. When will people stop leaving their countries? When they have freedom and democracy. Nobody wants to leave their home country. Nobody wants to leave their family. Nobody wants to live without the things that they love from childhood. But they are forced to do because they have to take care of their children. They have to take care of their family. So we would like to ensure that we build a network of promoting democracy and freedom. I think that the conversation that we will have today goes to the core values of this. We will have a first panel that will talk about fighting across borders. And that fight needs to be across borders, as I said before. So let's listen very carefully what it means to fight for freedom in each one of our countries, but also across borders. We will also have a panel about transnational repression. These regimes are seeking to kill people, activists, democracy defenders, in these countries, in democratic and free countries. Today we will hear from Masih Ali-Najad, co-founder of the World Liberty Congress, who has been the target of assassination attempts in US soil. She is today alive because they were able to capture their assassins right in front of her door in Brooklyn, New York, with an AK-47. And she's sitting right here with us today. So transnational repression, it's not a theory. It's not a news title. It's real, and it's affecting hundreds of people around the world. And we will also hear what it means to fight for democracy against dictators. We will hear activists and people to reflect what it means to fight against dictator in our home countries. And that requires a lot of commitment. It requires support. It requires to be clear that we cannot do this by ourselves. So I want to thank the Axel Springer Foundation. I want to thank very much the Naumann Foundation for having this conversation, for having these panels, for using this language, for making it clear that this is about democracy, about freedom, and that human rights can only happen if we push for transition in our countries. And I want to end by saying the following. When you think about Iran, when you think about Venezuela, when you think about Zimbabwe, when you think about Afghanistan, don't think that the people in those countries are like their regimes. Don't think that the women in Afghanistan and in Iran want to wear the hijab. Those who want to, fine. But those who don't want to should be given the right not to do. Don't think that the people in Venezuela like Maduro. Don't think that the people in Nicaragua like the autocrats or in Cuba. So we need their support. In the case of our countries, we have a very concrete agenda that we would like to promote. Number one, stop legitimizing the autocrats. Stop giving them platforms. Stop making them part of the normal conversation. Number two, make the autocrats accountable for their crimes. Make them accountable with international law, with sanctions, with the people who are killing the people in our countries. And number three, cut the cash flow from these countries. And finally, support democratic movements and people who are fighting for freedom in our countries. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And let's fight for freedom.